Hi, I'm Bill Ellison, and welcome to a special television edition of Grassroots. We're here tonight in beautiful downtown Philadelphia, Mississippi, with country music legend and Philadelphia native Marty Stuart. We're also honored to have with us tonight Dayton Duncan. Dayton is an award-winning writer and documentary filmmaker. Most recently, Dayton wrote and produced the latest Ken Burns documentary series, Country Music, which, by the way, you can see here on MPB. Welcome, Marty.
Hello, Bill.
And Dayton.
Hi, how you doing?
Let's start tonight with Dayton. Dayton, tell us how this country music series got started.
Well, a friend of Ken's, about 10 years ago, he was staying with the guy in Texas and said, Ken, how come you haven't done a series on country music? It seemed like it'd be a natural for you. And Ken thought about it a little bit and then called me up and said, somebody just said, why aren't we doing a series on country music like we did on jazz and baseball and so many other things? And what do you think? And it took me, I don't know, a little less than 2 seconds to say, I think it's a great idea as long as I'm the one that gets to write and produce it. And we started real work on it about 8 years ago, and it's been a labor of love for all of us.
Bill, can I say this? One of the things that I have championed for several years and never been quite able to get it done with PBS is a documentary on Jimmie Rodgers, the father of country music. And it's still an upsell in our home state to remind people and educate people who Jimmie Rodgers was, yep, what he means to American music, not just country music, but he was one of the foundational figures of all American music. And when I went up to Walpole, New Hampshire to view this film, there were several things that they approached that had never been embraced, taken head on with country music. The women's role in country music, black influence in country music and how it matters and what an influence it was. But what got me the most was you could take, is it an episode 1 or 2?
Yeah, 1.
You could basically take what they did on Jimmie Rodgers and lift it out, and we now have a Jimmie Rodgers documentary. You went deep, didn't you?
Yeah.
And found things that had never been seen.
We found photographs nobody had ever seen of him in blackface, you know, but also just lots of great photographs, but also trying to make the point that Marty did, the influence of the African-American railroad workers on him and his musical development. His, you know, he called himself the blue yodeler. Yeah. I mean, blue means something. And if you listen to him 3 days later after the Carter family came, and these two acts are viewed, rightly so, as foundational to the history of country music in the 20th century. Well, they aren't singing the same type of stuff, and they're not singing it the same type of way, and yet it is still country music. And they are, as the historian Bill Malone says in our film, one's the Saturday night side and one's the Sunday morning side, but they're two sides of the same coin. And so, and he's a great character, and it's both a rollicking story and a tragic story, because he's out there, you know, performing while he's dying of tuberculosis. And he also, as do the Carters, demonstrate this other unique thing with country music, I think, unlike any other genre of music, is this intensely personal connection between the artists and the fans. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the Carter family stayed in people's homes. When they didn't tour all that much, but when they did, they generally stayed in people's homes. Jimmie's out there, and everybody knows. He even creates his own. Works on his own song about the TB blues. Mm-hmm. You know, gee, but the graveyard is a lonesome place. And the fans, you know, just responded.
They were in on it with him.
They were, and they said, well, he's, you know, he understands us.
That's right.
And he's telling my story, whether it's, even if he didn't have TB, right? Many of his other songs were, this guy knows, he knows.
No Hard Time Blues.
Yeah,
that's right.
A lot of people could relate.
And,
well, that segment that you could lift out that I said, it's not only, it's a great gift to America, but it is an especially endearing gift to the state of Mississippi and its people, because we've never had a proper Jimmie Rodgers piece. And now we do. So thank you.
Great. Yeah. Because we don't think of it in terms of the homeboy, but he ranks there in the many gifts to music that Mississippi has given to our nation. And within country music, he starts with him. But I want to tell you, another great gift that Mississippi has given to our nation in music is this fellow right here.
Absolutely.
In his commitment to this Congress of country music, will be not only important as a treasure house and a repository for these aren't just artifacts. These help you understand this musical form, and people will come here. And so that's, that commerce and art, they're not, maybe they are separate, but they also intertwine a lot. And when they intertwine correctly, then the art helps the commerce, and the commerce helps, support that art. And this facility that you're building here is going to be great for the for Philadelphia, and it's going to be great for the state of Mississippi. And you're a giant in
my brother Dayton.
Talking about influences, following those influences can be interesting. I always heard that Howlin' Wolf, the blues master, was influenced by Jimmie Rodgers heavily.
Right.
And if I'm not mistaken, Jimmie and Bill Monroe are both in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
That's right.
Exactly.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things. One is it's never fully appreciated, or not appreciated enough publicly, how porous the separations between different genres are. Because artists don't draw those boundaries. They know things about bringing people together in music much better than we as a culture or society does. And they're always out in front of that, right? As Marty says in the opening of our second episode, that country music and hard times were meant for one another, because it rose up from people who already felt neglected or looked down upon or ignored. And they wanted the chance to tell their stories. And in hard times, so hard times was not uncommon for them to begin with, and the music strips it down to these elemental human experiences and human emotions and boils it down into a 3-minute song. And that's the highest form of art, really. It's poetry and it's music, and it's just getting at those things that can penetrate your heart as easily as possible. Music can do that. It's invisible, and it can do that in good writing. Poetry, which is the greatest expression of the written word.
And country music makes it accessible.
And that's the other
everybody.
thing. Yes, absolutely. It doesn't make it's not meant to say, oh, look, this is really arty. It's meant to communicate directly to people in simple words, and simple not meaning that they're not unaware of more complicated words, but in the simplest, most straightforward language possible, because they're trying to tell you something, a story, an emotion, and get right there into your heart.
And it is truly a reflection of the beauty, the hard times, the sweat, the toil of the American people. And I love it because it's something that academics can understand and study upon, but it's still, at the same time, the common man who works hard can cut loose on Saturday night and understand that it was meant to dance to, it was meant to cry to, it was meant to laugh to love to, and that's the beauty of the music to me. And as Dayton says, it is tangible. You can touch it, you can feel it, and when it's done properly, when country music really is done properly, it's for the ages. It truly is for the ages.
Yep.
And I tell you, one of the beauties of this film to me is that there came a point in my life I went, okay, I'm married to the girl I love. I got a used Cadillac with $100 in my pocket for gas and the best Telecaster guitar and some cowboy clothes. I'm set. and anything beyond that is gravy.
Yeah.
And so it became about following the heart so much instead of the chart. And I took out on this trail and stood by what I believed in and what I love that is I see as timeless. The roots empowering force of country music. But that speaks to a broader sense of what Mississippi's all about. If you drive across the state line, it says, "Welcome to the birthplace of America's music," and can back that up in every tributary of American music. But country music is linked right there at the bottom with jazz and blues and everything else. And these guys, once they explore something, it's curriculum. The thing I love about your work is all of your work. Dayton, you're such a treasure. You're such a great writer. Your national parks and your Lewis and Clark pieces. The minute that it leaves their hands, it becomes curriculum in classrooms. It becomes a timeless piece of Americana. And for the very thought of the culture of country music being elevated into those places in the 21st century, this is the first outing for country music at this level in the 21st century. Hadn't been any documentaries or films made about country music at this level ever, but especially in the 21st century. So the old timers who thought it would never be heard or seen again, they're going to be reassured. And a new generation of kids that are discovering the authenticity of country music, going beyond the face value of country music, well, look what they have to find now. And it also introduces an entire group of people who probably look down on country music, just to be quite frank about it, and think, I don't want anything to do with that. But all of a sudden, it becomes a cultural offering in these guys' hands. And that's the beauty of their work.
Wow.
Marty, this is a selfish question. My show is so bluegrass-centric, Grassroots. I have to ask you about, you and Ricky Skaggs are two people that come to mind that started in bluegrass. You with the
And
song?
Vince Gill.
Vince Gill, true.
And Vince Gill. We used the song Uncle Pen. They chose the song Uncle Pen, they being the Florentine kids. And they used Ricky and Vince and myself as the three bluegrass representatives. And that was a beautiful sound to me because we all grew up together, but we all became country stars and got our own worlds going. But the sound of those three voices together and those three hearts around that microphone, that really got me. It was magic. It really was.
He did a solo of Orange Blossom Special on his mandolin. Told a great story. Tell the story of you and Cash.
The fiddle is right back there. When Lester Flatt died, I was in Lester's band. And Lester passed away and I needed a job. I was like 20, 21 years old. So here comes the job with Johnny Cash. And I thought, this is my dream job. And John says, do you play the fiddle? I went, absolutely. Of course I play the fiddle. And I am the world's worst fiddle player.
That's why you should double check everything you say.
But so the first night, here comes Orange Blossom Special. He traditionally closed his concerts, Orange Blossom Special, playing the harmonicas. And he pointed at me, and I lit into it, and his eyes went. I have footage of him going. And at the end of the first tour, he wrote me this letter: "Dear son, glad to have you on the show. You had life and vitality, blah, blah, blah. Love JR." I called him JR. Then he put, "P.S. to all fiddles squeak are just yours." So I had to learn to play it on the mandolin.
On the mandolin.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But it wowed the crowd. No, I'm serious. But in terms of bluegrass, obviously in our documentary that traces the history of country music and its evolution and the different branches, bluegrass is a major...
Absolutely.
Major piece of the quilt.
Yeah.
Major voice in this.
Major voice and new thing. And Bill Monroe is a major figure who we follow. Well, we can't interview Bill Monroe, but we got Marty and Vince and Ricky, other people that could talk about him and help bring him to life, number one, and number two, help place him legitimately in the history of country music. In our film, Ricky Skaggs, he said, in his mind, Bill Monroe is as important as Charlie Parker, and they're around the same time. The same time that Charlie Parker is experimenting with what became known as bebop, it's energized jazz, after the swing era. Bill Monroe's been trying to, come up with something in his mind, but he didn't have it. Once he got Chubby Wise and Cedric Rainwater and Lester Flatt, and especially Earl Scruggs, and then you put Bill Monroe, and suddenly that mix, changed things. And we meet Bill Monroe as just a string band player, and we had one of the premier string bands, but then we also followed that thing with bluegrass, and then we followed the eras where suddenly, on the country radio, bluegrass and string band music just disappeared. And people, keep thinking, well, that's the death of that, isn't it? But what we discover is that no, in the festivals and the other things, it's kept alive.
Here comes the Old Crow Medicine Show.
And then here comes Ricky.
That's right.
As well later in the
that's right.
80s with the so-called new traditionalists. He's now played with Emmylou Harris's band, the Hot Band, and so brings to her band and her influence a little tinge of bluegrass. At the same time, he's looking around at these great West Coast musicians and say, I wonder what a drum would sound like on this song. All of American music can be found if you follow the path of the fiddle and the banjo. The fiddle comes from Europe and the British Isles. The banjo comes from Africa. And those two meet and mingle here in the United States, in the South, and that chain reaction reverberates not only through country music, but for all of American music.
Yep.
So right after we showed the clip that ends with him saying, follow the path of the fiddle and the banjo, we said, out come Rhiannon Giddens with her banjo and Ketch with his fiddle. And they did "Ruby, Are You Mad at Your Man?"
Oh, wow.
And I
You could have quit the show right there.
Yeah, well, I think that what the crowd just, it really got their attention.
Yeah,
They said,
it did.
oh, this is what this is. We're they were leaning forward and also blown back in the back of their seats because they thought this is going to be something tonight.
Marty, I've always been fascinated with your story of hitting the road with the Sullivans at 12. Was it 12,
Actually,
13?
12, yeah.
And then moving to Lester's band. But walking around the beginnings of the museum here, there's some incredible photographs. As I say, I've always been fascinated with that. That had to have been quite an experience for a sixth grader to hit the road.
I was practicing my autograph in the 3rd grade.
So you were ready.
Started my first band when I was 9. And we were playing, there's a picture at the lobby of the Ellison of me and my buddy Butch Hodges and his brother Ricky. We played for the Rotary Club, and somebody did an article in a paper, and the caption says, "The local boy says, hard to make a living playing country music in Beatles society." But I felt like it was my job in this part of the world. Rock and roll was represented well. There were rock bands in town, there were soul bands in town, rhythm and blues bands in town, a little bit of country music, no bluegrass at that time. One guy in this town named John Cook liked bluegrass. But I felt like as kids, I thought I assigned myself as Merle Haggard and Johnny Cash and Flatt and Scruggs representative. And I loved that. And when it came time to go on the road with the Sullivans, it just felt perfectly natural.
You were ready.
I was ready. And at the end of that summer, when they dropped me off to go back to school and start the 9th grade, I felt like the circus had dropped me off at the edge of town and went on, and I was a pitiful excuse for a student because I knew the band was playing. And I was sitting there reading about Magellan or something. I didn't have Lewis and Clark to look at that time. But I basically got kicked out of school for reading a country music song roundup in class. And I made a call to Roland White, who was in Lester's band, and said, this would be a good time to take you up on your offer to come in for a visit. So I begged my mother and dad to let me go to Nashville for a weekend. And Lester heard me and offered me a job. And that's right. And it was never the same after that.
And this was really before homeschooling, but you were sort of homeschooled on the bus.
I was in the correspondence course from Chicago, American school. And I had no help with Lester and those guys. I walked up into the front of the bus one day, and they were all playing poker, and I said, excuse me, can somebody tell me what a pronoun is? And Lester said, let's see, I believe that goes on a tractor. Give me an ace. I just threw my book and went, that's it, I'm done.
He said it with conviction, huh?
Yeah, he did.
Well, gentlemen, this has been
Thank
an
you,
absolute
Bill.
delight.
It's been a delight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.